Friends, welcome to week 2 of Exploring God's Story. I hope that you have found it enriching as you've been reading through these passages, and that you are inviting the Holy Spirit to write you into the story so that you might know it deeply for yourself and how God has called you to participate in God's unfolding story amongst us. This week we're continuing through Genesis and looking at these origin stories, so to speak, of God's relationship with us, and looking particularly now at Abraham's descendants, Isaac, Jacob, and Esau here. Isaac is Abraham's son. We met him last week, and now we're focusing in on Isaac's children, Jacob and Esau, twins who can't get along together. We start off in Genesis 27 when Jacob ends up tricking his brother out of his own birthright there, and that causing such a rift between the two that Esau is looking to kill Jacob. So Jacob has to run for his life. And the rest of Jacob's saga, the rest of Jacob's story is really centered around the fact that he can't get along with his brother, and God is trying to work with him and trying to help him learn what it means to be reconciled. All of that comes to a head later on in Genesis chapter 33, where Jacob and Esau meet again. But before they meet, Jacob literally has to wrestle God until God changes him fundamentally in order for him to be able to reconcile again with his brother Esau. Later on, we catch up with Jacob's sons, particularly his son Joseph, and how Jacob's sons have the same issue that Jacob and Esau had, and that is the problem of relationship. Friends, all of this story is about relationship. Joseph and his brothers, they find themselves at odds with each other. Particularly Joseph's brothers ended up having some jealousy and some hatred towards Joseph, so much so that they end up beating him, throwing him into a pit, and then later selling him as a slave to some Midianites, who then sell him as a slave in Egypt then. They tell their father that this son of yours was killed. And Jacob weeps for his son, thinking his son is dead. Meanwhile, Joseph is serving as a slave in Egypt, and he ends up being wrongfully accused and being thrown into prison, where he languishes for quite some time until, through some very circumstantial means, ends up interpreting a dream for Pharaoh. And Pharaoh has favor on him, releases him from prison, and makes him the second in command of all of Egypt. And it's from this exalted place, as we later find in Genesis, around Genesis 42, that Joseph then encounters his brothers once more. And Joseph has to wrestle with, what does it mean to be in forgiveness and love and reconciliation with my brothers who did me wrong? And we find this saga between Joseph and his brothers in these different ways, that Joseph is wrestling with his own feelings, but then also finding a way to be in connection again with his brothers. That all gets resolved by the grace of God there and by the hand of God. But it leads eventually to Joseph being not only reunited with his family, but moving his entire family, that whole lineage that started with Abram being brought into Canaan, moving them into Egypt, where they live and they thrive. And this becomes the setting and the backdrop for Exodus chapter 1. When we get to Exodus chapter 1, we find that the Israelites, as they've now been known, have been living in Egypt for a long time. And in the midst of that, they have not only thrived, but these immigrant people have become a little bit of a threat to the native Egyptians in that way. So it's that when a new king, a new Pharaoh arises, he enacts policies that are meant to oppress them further, and eventually leads to a genocide amongst them. It's in the midst of this that a young man, Moses, is born. And we find his incredible story beginning in Exodus chapter 2, where Moses is born, and then leading to this incredible experience that Moses has in Exodus chapter 3, where after he has found his way into Midian country, back really in Canaan, where his peoples are originally from, he encounters God in an incredible way through a burning bush. It says that while he was tending the sheep, he saw this incredible sight, And he decided to turn aside, to look and wonder. And that's when God called his name. I pray that as you dive deep into God's story this week, that you might turn aside and see and look and wonder and hear God calling your name as well as we explore together.